Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Yes, you better take notes. I'm Lynn Silipigni Connaway, and I am the Director of Library Trends and User Research at OCLC. And I want to, I'm going to introduce you. And I just want to tell you what you're here for, in case you've forgotten. We have a grant, an IMLS-funded grant. It's a 4-year project, and it's the title is Researching Students' Information Choices, Determining Identity and Credibility in Digital Spaces. And these are our research questions. And so we were interested in understanding, first of all, do STEM students differentiate among different types of digital resources at point of selection? And how do STEM students determine this? Now, this is our research group at one of our meetings, and I have two of my colleagues here who, you want to be Vanna White? Do you want to? Yes. And so this is the research team, and I'm very lucky to have two of our colleagues here. And Joyce Valenza is here, and Joyce is on the faculty at Rutgers University. And Sam Putnam is here, and Sam is one of the librarians at the University of Florida who are on this grant. And then we also have an advisory panel. And so we looked at students from 4th grade through graduate students. And so we have an advisory panel for the K through 12 group and for the adult group. And the catalyst for this project came from this quote from Williams and Rollins. And so they were talking about how Google generation, they are format agnostic. And so what does that mean? And so our other colleagues, Tara Coben Cataldo, yes, and Amy Bueller, they decided that they wanted to submit this grant because they work with STEM students and they wanted to learn this. And so we started talking about this container collapse. And somebody today said to me, I'm a metadata librarian and container means something else. And I'm not sure that's exactly true.
I think it was Amy who came up with this visual. So imagine you have a bottle of fine wine, and imagine you pour it into a decanter. It's kind of the same thing as what's happening with digital information. It's decanted, and that label is no longer as visible and as lovely as it once was. And so, Lynn?
Okay, Vanna, change the screen.
Yes.
Okay, so our methods, the really interesting part, and that's why we were called in at OCLC Research, because we came up with the methodology. And so we first did a pre-screening survey, because that's how we created our sampling frame, and I won't get into that. But we collected a lot of demographics. And then we took all the participants from Alachua County in Florida. And so we have 4th and 5th graders, 6th to 8th graders, 9th through 12th graders, community colleges, university undergraduates, and university graduate students. And then we had simulation tasks, and I won't go through all of that, but there were different tasks. So we asked them, was this useful? Would you cite this for one of your research projects? Why were they not useful? How credible are these? Why? And then we talked about the container and asked them, what is this container? And so these were some of the simulations. So you can see the top one, they had to choose. So they had to choose 20 items. And then would they cite them? And then how would they evaluate them? Are they credible? And then identify the container. So you can see with the container, we have blog, book, conference, proceeding, all of those things. And Sam, you collected a lot of the data. Anything you want to add about that?
Here we go. So it was really interesting so each simulation would take, on the short end, an hour, on the long end, 2.5 hours. And so we'd be sitting there with these students, and we would use the Think Aloud protocol, which I don't think has been mentioned yet. But it's basically that throughout this entire process, we're recording the audio, and that we're asking them to think aloud. So make sure you're stating your decision-making process.
Question.
Were the students working just from the description, or were they looking at the actual resource?
They were looking at the Google search results, and then they were able to click into the Google search results and see the actual resource. So the interesting thing was that we used this product called Storyline, which was how we created these sort of the faux Google results. But they worked all the same ways. They could click on all the links. They'd open up things that said, PDF, and they could open up PDF. And so we watched them go through all these process. It was the entire process.
So I think if we go back,
this
is what they didn't see all four at once, but this is what they were looking at.
And what we were looking for to make this a bit engaging was something that would be locally relevant for these students and also a little bit icky. And so so it was the Burmese python who is threatening the ecosystem in Florida, in the Everglades. And it was a little graphic at points.
Yeah.
And so we're moving to the next.
Yes.
Okay.
And so if you look at these are the resources, and so you'll see for the adults, we had 5 blog entries. So that's what this means. For the adults, we had 7 books. For the 9 through 12, we had 5 books. So that's what this depicts.
Is this what they chose?
No, this is what we offered them.
The range of choices.
Yes. So these are high-level findings.
And we'd love for you to react to these.
Because we had, 174 individuals. And as Sam said, these were anywhere from an hour to 2.5 hours. And so the coding is astronomical for this. And so you'll see, I find this quite interesting. We asked when students first used the Internet. And look at these numbers. Younger than 5 years old and 6 to 10 years old. The blue are the K through 12, and the orange are the adults. And so most of the individuals who we are working with in our libraries, whether they're school, public, academic, are actually have been using the Internet for probably many years. And then we asked where they use the Internet. And you'll see most of the time it's at home and then next to school. And then we asked 2 questions. In the survey, we asked if a librarian had helped them with research in the past 2 years. And then in the interview, we asked them if they had asked a librarian for help with a research project. So the one was in the last 2 years, and one was if they've just ever asked. And so you'll see the results there. So the interview is ever. So this is the survey in the last 2 years. And look at the nose. And now this comes to our container collapse that we were talking about. So the students really do believe that it's important to know the container for online information sources. But the number does decrease with the younger students of this importance.
And you'll see that.
And you'll see that in this. So you can see that the importance with the adults, the elementary school, and then the adults. And you'll see here from community college to graduate students, it's between 97 to 100% that they believe it's very important to know. And then I love this. How confident are students when selecting online sources? And again, you'll see they're pretty, when you add pretty confident with very confident, they're pretty confident. And when we talk to them, you hear that they know.
And the line seems to be consistent between the children and the adults.
Yes. And then these are just some of the quotes from the individuals. And so, someone says, what's a preprint? I don't really know if New York Times is a journal or a magazine. I know this is a blog because it's by a person that wrote it. This is a journal because of the feel of it looking like a scholarly article. This one's a blog, or is it a journal, or is it a book? It's a journal. And this shouldn't be so hard. But yet they're very confident. So these are pilot results. So I want to say pilot does not mean findings. So we did do, we had 2 community college students, 2 undergraduate students, and 2 graduate students, because we were doing this to test everything. And so when you look at the container task, the undergraduates had the most correct answers, which I found interesting. I don't know if that surprises anyone else. Did it surprise you?
It did, but look how low the number is.
It is very low.
And there was and considering the level of confidence we saw in the last data, this is really shocking.
Yeah, I was very surprised.
Is that percentage or is that the number of correct answers?
The number of correct.
Right, and N is 174.
No, this is our pilot. The 6
that's a pilot. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Yes, you're right.
This is the
So
6
is that
individuals.
Yeah, correct answers.
And they had 40
questions. Sorry about that. Yeah.
Sorry.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes, you're right. That's important.
Always have ends.
Could you go back?
Certainly.
Sure. So we had 40, and the undergraduates were right here with the container.
Are you
task.
seeing
Yeah.
in your settings?
Really testing it, so it's more anecdotal.
Yeah, we'll have a conversation about this in a little bit, but think about if what we were seeing in our pilot and what the data is starting to point to, if you're seeing similar scenes.
So
situations.
now I find this interesting. So the most agreement for the container was with the New York Times, the Springer Journal, the Wiley Journal, and the Google Book. Now the least agreement came with the USGS government news. They weren't sure if it was a journal, a website, news, or a preprint. And then with the US Gov Book, journal, book, website. And then Royal Society Publishing, they didn't know if it was a conference proceeding, a journal, or a preprint.
The elementary students were not given that.
This is only adults. These are those 6 adults, yes. Yeah. And the elementary students had 20 items, and the adults had 40.
We worked with the advisory team to select the items for each of these experiences. Okay.
So, and each time you touch it, we'll see. So you'll see, there's the Springer link, and then here it tells you download book. And here it says download chapter. So these are the cues. And also what we learned, and I don't think we have a slide on this, is if they can see the URL, and if it says something in that URL about the container, that's another cue. And then this, again, is the download the book. And this, again, is the download the chapter. So it's multiple times that they're giving these cues with Springer, and they were able to identify the Springer information. So now this is, if you want to...
Sure.
Okay, this was the Google. It's a book. So again, the cues.
Did you want to go back into this a little?
But yeah, so those were the cues for this.
One of the things we heard them say was if it was a book, they did not think they could get it online. Even though it said download the book, they thought they'd have to actually physically get up and go to the library to get it, even though it said download book. That was strange. Okay.
Now, did you want to add anything, Sam, since you did a lot of these simulations?
Yeah, it was definitely interesting to see what, specifically with the Google Books one, it was almost like they knew it right away. Like anything Google, they were like, they could pick it up right off the bat. They were like, oh, that's a Google book. We heard that a lot. But then with Springer, it definitely took that little bit of a higher level knowledge of them. I felt just anecdotally that they were acknowledging like Springer as as a publisher that's okay. And then for them to figure out book, it was like only because book was there. You know, if it was a journal and there were all the cues that it was a journal, if there was an issue and a volume or all the things, they wouldn't necessarily pick up on that. But with Springer and book being right there, it was like that is an easy cue for them to pick up on.
I think these heuristics were really interesting. What it looked like to us with this very small group in the pilot was if they heard a professor at some point say, I love Springer, that stuck with them for years, and they didn't realize that there were an awful lot of other academic publishers that were equally good and that they might make really fabulous discoveries if they looked outside that heuristic box, which was sometimes helping them work efficiently, but often obscuring other good content that they might have discovered.
Now, I love these quotes. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Who are your adults? They're not higher ed adults?
Yeah, they are. They were community college, a university undergrad, and university graduate students.
They're in higher ed. They still are struggling.
Yes, it is. I love, this is my favorite quote, especially today. When you think of the government, you think reputable and credible. Again, what is a preprint? Open access journals, I'm sometimes questionable about. If it has a DOI, it's peer reviewed. Springer articles are inherently credible. I'd probably stay away from anything that made it look too flashy. On Wikipedia, nobody really cares enough about science sources to make them wrong.
There was a real positive response on many of the students in the pilot relating to Wikipedia. Because of the number of editors, it made it much more credible, which may be the case in some cases. But
And then Springer, this one, Springer.com, never heard of it. An academic. And so then, did you want to add anything? No. And then we asked, why is it important? If they said it's important to know the container, we asked, okay, why is it important to know the container? And these are some of their responses. It's important, but does not differentiate a ton between types. Blogs, people ranting, news all over the place, don't know who to trust. Blog is opinion, article may have some opinion. Helps you determine whether or not it is from a credible source. Blogs are opinions.
So one of the things I think was really interesting was they weren't all blogs that were that there was nothing behind. There were a couple of New York Times blogs that they just dismissed.
Yes. And all have a different way of framing information. Even peer-reviewed journals have a spin, but at least they need to cite where the info came from. It is very important to know if from a book or journal instead of a blog. It is important because the source has to be reputable. So whatever reputable means. And so why did we do this? What's the potential impact for all of us? That so what question. Basically, I think it can really help us develop curriculum for information literacy, digital literacy, and citation styles. For me, I keep thinking of the cues on the web pages. When we create anything on our web pages, think of the cues that we should be including, even in the URL, and we mask a lot of that. And then informed design of digital information, emphasize the need to instruct sooner. And that comes from many of these individuals who we're working with started using the web when they were younger than 5 years old. And emphasize the need for this consistent instruction. And I'm going to turn it over to both of you because this is more of your area of expertise. So if you want to chime in.
Well, one of the relating this to practice, which is I'm hoping what some of you will do. I made a discovery as a high school librarian a little while back. I had a student who came in to me and he said, Dr. Valenza, you are always teaching us the same stuff. You've introduced this database 100 times. You've introduced this and this and this. What do you do? What do students in college do? What do graduate students do? And he made me realize, I started calling him Adam, because Adam in the Bible started naming things. And once he started naming the things around him, he began to better understand his world. And so as we think about our work with students, I think that many of them don't have the vocabulary of search. And when you think about that vocabulary, in many cases, that is a threshold concept. Once you know what a preprint is, you'll never forget what a preprint is, especially if you recognize that if you have that preprint, it may be able to get you beyond a paywall. And so there's an advantage in some ways to a preprint. There are certainly disadvantages. But introducing vocabulary at an early age, perhaps even at middle school, students ought to know that people present at conferences, and there are such things as conference proceedings. There's no reason they shouldn't know that kind of vocabulary. We're conscious of the notion of automatic citation generators. I don't ever want to go back and not have them. I don't ever want to go back and not have the scaffolding that our databases give us relating to citation generation. But how are we going to compensate for the stuff that we're not thinking about? And I don't have an easy answer for that, because I, again, don't want to go back to the old days. But what are we looking at? Can we put some kind of emphasis, perhaps, on annotative bibliographies, which actually say, here's why I chose this preprint or this blog post, and have the learner justify the choice? So those are some of the things that I'm thinking about.
And Sam?
In terms of practice, because I'm an engineering librarian, and there are about 5,000 engineering undergraduates at the University of Florida. And one of the biggest things that just doing these repeatedly taught me was that you can't assume anything with what these students know. There's a lot of You make assumptions about students that make it to a really high-level university, that they maybe know some of these things. And I sort of realized that because there is no standardized information literacy education, in the state of Florida specifically, but pretty much anywhere, we need to start from the baseline. You need to start from the very beginning, because just yesterday I had a student, or 2 days ago. How long have I been here? It's been a while. Just a few days ago I had a student who had never come up with the concept of using references to find other resources, right? And so you sort of make these assumptions sometimes about your undergraduate students, and so removing those assumptions has been exceptionally helpful, just having done so many of these.
I completely agree. I think one of the things is the K-12 experience was completely inconsistent. We had some students who didn't ever have a research project. They said they did a diorama at one point. And so there was that. And then, as Sam was talking, going back to that vocabulary, calling something citation chaining or snowballing or pearl growing, those are things we introduce in LIS education. But why not use those terms with students? They're great strategies. And once you try citation chaining, once you understand that an article cites other people and is cited, and it's easy to find that stuff in any database or in Google Scholar, you can't forget a strategy like that. But how many of our students know that when they get out of their senior year in high school? I don't know. What's your...
And I think we'll tell, these are some of the references and how you can get to our work. And so I want to thank you, but I want to open it up to all of you for your comments and questions.